On the west coast of the Indian Peninsula lies a stretch of land caressed by the refreshing breezes of the Arabian Sea. Legend has it that the ancient warrior Parashurama shot an arrow westward from the Sahyadri Hills and reclaimed all the land up to the point where the arrow landed in the sea. The land was called the Konkan, and its pride was Goa. Goa is carpeted with lush rice paddies and is blessed with an abundance of coconut and tropical fruit trees. Cashews grow on the hills that are also rich in minerals such as iron and manganese. Flowing through this land are several scenic rivers, many of them navigable for long distances. They are the arteries on which Goa depends for transporting ore from the mines to the ocean terminal at Marmagoa. Goa's 40-mile-long western border is a magnificent coastline of sandy palm-fringed beaches, varying in size from small secluded ones to the sprawling beaches of Kalangut and Kolva that stretch for several miles. The ocean is a source of employment for hundreds of fishermen, many of whom still use the traditional outrigger, the boarding. The beaches are also a retreat from the heat and humidity of the summer months when Goans take in the refreshing breezes of the Arabian Sea and enjoy its beautiful sunsets. Being blessed with such a congenial environment, it is no wonder then that the people of Goa are generally contented, peaceful, and tolerant. The population is mainly Hindu and Catholic, and theirs has been a life of peaceful coexistence. The main towns are the centers of commerce, where the busy pace is uncharacteristic of that of rural Goa. Back in the villages, life is noted for its relaxed pace, described in one Portuguese word, susegado. It's a life of leisurely visits to the village market or the church, protected from rain or sun by the ubiquitous umbrella. It is also a haven for retirees to enjoy the tranquility of rural life, unhurried and in harmony with the beauty of the tropics. The character of modern Goa was tempered by the Portuguese who colonized Goa in 1510. Having charted a sea route to the east as an alternative to the Silk Route through Arabia, the Portuguese established Goa as their trading base when Afonso de Albuquerque sailed up the Mandovi River and defeated the Bijapuri king. It was not long before Goa became the missionary center for spreading Christianity over an area stretching from East Africa to China. The site that the Portuguese chose for their capital was Old Goa, as it is known today. The city was deserted in the 18th century following a malaria epidemic, and all that remains today is a cluster of churches, convents, and monasteries that has been designated a United Nations World Heritage Site. The massive size of the churches are testimony to the greatness of this once thriving city that was referred to as the Rome of the East. The ceremonial approach to Old Goa is by way of the Arch of the Viceroys, which was built in honor of the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama, discoverer of the sea route from Europe to India. The focal point of Old Goa is the Sé, which was built in 1562, so as to be, in the words of the then Viceroy, a grandiose temple worthy of the wealth, power, and fame of the Portuguese, who dominate the seas from the Atlantic to the Pacific. One of its towers collapsed a long time ago, but the other houses the famous Golden Bell, noted for its melancholy sound. The interior of the Sé is majestic and a manifestation of the importance Portugal attached to establishing a strong Christian presence in this part of the world. As competition for converts grew, other religious orders began vying for prominence. The Church of St. Francis of Assisi was built right behind the Sé. The building is impressive in size and is a splendid example of Manueline architecture. The main floor bears the coat of arms and family crests of members of Portugal's nobility buried here. Across the street from the Sé is the Church of St Cajetan, built on the lines of St Peter's Basilica in Rome by the Theatines, an Italian religious order, and it's the only church in Goa with distinctive Roman architectural lines. From the Sé and the Church of St Francis of Assisi, it's a short walk across the plaza to the jewel of all Goa's churches and the most sacred to all Goans. It's the Basilica of Bal Jesu. The splendor of its interior surpasses that of any other church in Goa, and its main altar is a classic example of Portuguese art and Goan craftsmanship. But most importantly, it is the resting place of St. Francis Xavier, venerated by all Goans as their patron saint, and his remains are enshrined in a mausoleum crafted by Florentine sculptor Giovanni Battista Foggini. A short distance away from the Basilica of Bal Jesu is another cluster of churches, chapels, and convents. Part of a tower is all that remains of the Church of St Augustine, which was one of the largest churches in Goa. It overlooks St Anthony's Chapel across the street and Santa Monica's convent, the latter noted for its massive buttresses and its beautiful frescoes. The road under the arch leads to a point overlooking the Mandovi River, where Goa's first church, the Church of the Rosary, was built in 1510. Other nearby churches are that of St. Jude, now a home for the aged, and the Chapel of St. Catherine, built in 1510 on the site where Afonso de Albuquerque defeated Adil Shah. With Catholicism gaining strength, Hindu temples were moved to the remoter forested parts of Goa, where Hinduism could be practiced free of any constraints. In the larger villages, Catholics built imposing churches and chapels and reminded the inhabitants of Goa's dominant religion by erecting roadside and riverside crosses all across Goa. Administrative centers like MAPSA were established in each district. These centers were also noted for their weekly bazaars when people would come to town from nearby villages and get to meet with friends and relatives from other villages. When all Goa had to be abandoned following a malaria epidemic, Panjim, a town downriver on the Mandovi, was established as the new capital. Panjim still reflects 450 years of Portuguese influence. The town square is surrounded by buildings with a distinctive Latin character, and some streets and stores still retain Portuguese names. One of Panjim's landmarks is the statue of Abbe Faria. He is reputed to be the father of hypnotism, a claim that cannot be substantiated, although it is true that he worked with his German colleagues in perfecting the science of hypnosis and was at one time jailed for heresy. Today, Abbe Faria's statue shares its prominence with the Church of the Immaculate Conception, a church that once stood for a power intolerant of anyone who questioned its supreme authority in social and scientific matters. Goa today is no longer a part of Portugal. It is the newest state in the Indian Republic, and it is becoming increasingly industrialized. However, it still retains a treasure of scenic beauty and a colorful heritage that needs to be preserved for all to enjoy. Goa's rice paddies have a lushness that conveys a feeling of self-sufficiency and contentment. The openness of its fields is reflected in the Goan character, an openness to any culture and a love for the niceties of life without the encumbrances of politics and petty communal rivalries. Happiness is relaxing in one's balcony or balcony, enjoying a refreshing breeze and just watching the world go by. Almost every house has a balcony, from the small cottage to the large mansion. Those that don't have the long and airy veranda. To appreciate Goa, one has to spend some time in a village. One such village is Saligão in the heart of Goa. The southern approach is from the hills that border half of the village. The northern approach is by way of an impressive avenue of coconut trees. The colonial Portuguese influence is evident in some of the larger homes in Saligão, symbols of affluence acquired through a conversion to Catholicism. But most of the homes are smaller, with a unique layout, the saal or hall that runs the entire length of the frontage, then the bedrooms, followed by the dining room, and finally the kitchen and the well. The homes, nestled among coconut trees, are grouped in wards on the outskirts of the village. The wards surround neatly laid out paddy fields in the center of the village and are connected by palm-lined causeways. The main road that runs through the village is very narrow, yet remarkably wide enough for two-way traffic. Saligão has two high schools that provide a high standard of education. The emphasis on education is just as strong in the village as it is in the city. The underlying character of all villagers displays a deep devotion to their faith, be it Hinduism or Catholicism. Every ward has its chapel and temple, but what unites the entire village is the Church of Remedios, or Mother of God. The church is over 125 years old, but relatively new when compared to other churches in Goa, many of which were built in the 16th century. And it is the only church in Goa with a steeple, a feature not found in Portuguese churches. The main altar, like that of all churches in Goa, is ornate. The side altars, one of which is dedicated to Goa's patron saint St. Francis Xavier, are equally impressive. The other altars and statues are fine examples of Goan craftsmanship, and the pulpit is still used on special occasions to preach the virtues of sticking to the straight and narrow, virtues that have helped Goans be good citizens in their adopted lands all over the world. So as we take in this brief era in the history of Goa, it won't be too difficult to understand why the 16th century Portuguese poet Luís de Camões was inspired to describe Goa as the pearl of the Orient. It's a jewel that should be treasured and invested in such a way as to enrich the future with the best of the past.